John, a simple farmer, was finishing his daily chores on his farm. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm orange glow over the fields. He wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked out over the vast expanse of crops he had worked so hard to plant. The day had been long, but it was time to head back to the farmhouse and get some rest. He loved the quiet of his farm. The peace of it was something he had always sought, and after years of hard work, he had finally made the farm his own. As John walked back to the house, a strange noise caught his attention. It was distant at first, like a low growl, but it grew louder. Confused, he stopped in his tracks and listened. It wasn't the usual noise from his animals. It sounded different. The noise was coming from the edge of his property, near the woods. John's curiosity got the best of him, and he walked cautiously toward the source of the sound. As he neared the woods, the noise turned into a low, painful whine. John's heart raced. He had no idea what it was, but something inside told him that someone, or something, was in trouble. The closer he got, the more the sound became clear, a wounded creature in pain. His instincts kicked in, and without thinking, he rushed into the trees, following the sounds. When John reached a small clearing, he froze in shock. There, lying on the ground, was a massive creature. Its body was covered in dark, thick fur, and it had the appearance of a wolf. But unlike anything he had ever seen before, its eyes glowed faintly, and it had large, sharp claws that looked like they could tear through metal. This was no ordinary animal. The creature was clearly hurt, its side was bleeding, and it looked weak, breathing heavily as it lay on the ground. John stepped closer, trying to assess the situation. He noticed that the creature had an unusual aura about it, a certain presence, as if it were not entirely of this world. Its features were sharp, and its ears were unlike any animal he had ever encountered, shaped like those of an elf or a mythical being. For a moment, John hesitated. He had never seen anything like this before. His mind raced with questions. Was it dangerous? What was it doing here? But as he looked into the creature's eyes, he saw something that made his heart soften, a sense of vulnerability. This was no wild beast. It was hurt, and it needed help. John's fear faded, replaced by a deep sense of compassion. Despite the creature's terrifying appearance, he couldn't just leave it to suffer. He took a deep breath, then slowly knelt down, trying to get closer without startling it. The creature's eyes followed him, and though it seemed wary, it made no move to attack. John carefully reached out a hand, murmuring softly to calm it. "You're okay," John whispered, though he wasn't entirely sure if the creature could understand him. "I won't hurt you." To his surprise, the creature didn't pull away. Instead, it shifted slightly, as though it was too weak to move, but it didn't seem hostile. John decided to take the risk. He gently touched the creature's side, noticing the warmth of its skin and the deep, ragged breaths it was taking. He had to act fast. John stood up and quickly made his way back to the farmhouse. He had a first aid kit in his closet, and he figured that would be the best way to start treating the creature's injuries. He didn't know if it would be enough, but it was all he had. When he returned to the clearing, he found the creature still lying there, weaker than before. John hurriedly set the kit down and knelt beside the creature again. His hands trembled as he worked quickly to clean the wound. He wasn't a trained medic, but he knew enough to help an injured animal. He wrapped the wound with gauze and carefully tied it in place. The creature watched him intently, its eyes never leaving John's face. When he finished, he took a moment to catch his breath and try to figure out what to do next. "Can you stand?" John asked, unsure if the creature could even understand him. He stood back a little, watching as the alien wolf soldier slowly shifted its weight. The creature made a low growl of discomfort, but managed to get to its feet, albeit unsteadily. It was obvious that it wasn't in the best condition, but at least it was trying to move. John felt a strange sense of pride. He had helped this creature when it was at its weakest, and now it was standing, ready to fight or flee. He took a step back, giving the creature space. There was no telling what it would do now, but John knew one thing for sure. It wasn't just some wild animal. It was intelligent, and there was something about it that felt different. The alien wolf soldier looked at John one last time before it turned its gaze toward the forest, its ears flicking as if listening for something. John stood still, wondering what would happen next. Would the creature stay, or would it leave? Could it survive out there on its own? John was left with more questions than answers, but one thing was certain: his life was about to change. He had just helped an alien soldier, and the consequences of his actions were yet to unfold. The days that followed were strangely calm, but they were also filled with uncertainty. John had returned to his usual routine on the farm, tending to his crops and animals, but his mind was always occupied with the image of the creature he had helped. The alien wolf soldier, whom he had called Rakor, was still in a weakened state, though it appeared to be healing. Every morning, John would find the creature resting near the barn, but Rakor never ventured far. He had stayed close to the farmhouse, as if unsure about what to do next. He hadn't spoken a word since John first found him, and though his eyes occasionally met John's with a strange look, one that John couldn't quite understand, the alien soldier said nothing. He just watched, his golden eyes glimmering with curiosity and wariness. John, on the other hand, couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He had never seen anything like Rakor before. The creature's size, strength, and strange features were unlike anything John had encountered in his quiet, peaceful life as a farmer. He couldn't help but wonder where Rakor had come from, what kind of life he had led, and most importantly, why he had ended up on Earth in such a condition. Despite the silence, John felt a strange bond growing between them. He didn't know why he felt so connected to this creature, but there was something about Rakor that seemed different. He wasn't just an alien soldier. He was a being, vulnerable and hurt, seeking help. John's compassion for Rakor was undeniable, even though he had no idea who or what he really was. The only time Rakor showed any sign of communication was when John brought food. John would set a bowl of water and some meat near the creature, and each time, Rakor would slowly approach it. His movements were careful, almost as if he were testing whether John's intentions were genuine. He ate the food in silence, his sharp eyes always alert, as if waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. Days turned into a week, and John had started to make a routine of his new life with Rakor. In the mornings, John would do his work on the farm, and in the afternoons, he would check on Rakor. Over time, Rakor grew stronger, his wounds healing under John's care. The alien soldier's fur was starting to regain its shine, and his movements were becoming more confident. But still, he never spoke. John couldn't tell if the creature was mute or simply choosing not to communicate, but it was starting to wear on him. He longed for some kind of connection, some acknowledgement that they were more than just two beings sharing space. One afternoon, as John worked in the fields, he noticed Rakor sitting at the edge of the forest, staring into the distance. The creature was perfectly still, his posture rigid and focused. John wiped the sweat from his forehead and walked over to him, wondering if something was wrong. "Rakor," John called gently, unsure of how to address the creature. The alien's ears twitched slightly at the sound of his voice, but he didn't turn to look at John. Instead, he remained fixated on the trees ahead. John stood beside him, not quite sure what to do. He didn't want to intrude on whatever Rakor was thinking, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air. Something was different today. It was as if the calm that had surrounded them was about to shift. Rakor's eyes finally moved toward John, but they were distant, almost lost. For a moment, they both stood there, the silence between them heavier than usual. John waited for some kind of reaction, but none came. The alien soldier simply returned his gaze to the forest. "What is it?" John asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Rakor remained silent, and John wasn't sure if the creature understood him or was even capable of answering. Still, John's curiosity pushed him to ask, "Are you waiting for something? Someone?" Rakor's eyes flicked back to John for a split second, but still, he didn't answer. The weight of the moment hung between them, and John began to feel the same unease that had plagued him the first time he encountered Rakor. There was something bigger at play here, something that went beyond their quiet, simple life on the farm. As the day wore on, John couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He caught glimpses of ships in the sky, high above the treetops. He thought it was probably just his imagination, but the more he saw the ships, the more he began to wonder if they were real. Could they have been linked to Rakor? Was he part of something bigger, something dangerous? Rakor seemed to notice John's growing discomfort. For the first time, he turned fully toward him. His eyes were intense, but still, he said nothing. "I think they're looking for you," John said, almost to himself, his words breaking the silence. His heart raced as he stared at the distant ships. Could it be true? Rakor's expression didn't change, but for the first time, John saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes. Fear. The alien soldier stood slowly, his large body towering over John. His muscles tensed as he looked once more to the sky, as if anticipating something. John stepped back, unsure of what was coming next. Was Rakor in danger? What had he gotten himself into by helping this strange being? The air felt charged, as if something was about to happen. John's mind raced, and a feeling of dread began to settle deep in his stomach. He didn't know what Rakor was running from, but he had a sinking feeling that their peaceful life on the farm was about to be shattered. The days following Rakor's silent warning were filled with tension. John couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something beyond his control. The distant ships in the sky became more frequent, hovering higher in the sky each day. John tried to ignore it at first, convincing himself it was just a coincidence. But as the days passed, he began to realize that whatever was happening, it was linked to the alien wolf soldier he had helped. Rakor had grown stronger since his arrival. His wounds had healed, and though he still didn't speak, his body language had changed. He no longer spent his days lying around the farmhouse or resting in the barn. Instead, he spent long hours walking around the farm, carefully observing everything, almost as if he were studying John's routine. At times, John would catch him watching the sky, his golden eyes narrowed, as though waiting for something. John was still unsure of what to make of Rakor. The creature had saved his life when he first found him injured, and now the tables had turned. John had become the one offering help, offering food, shelter, and a place to heal. Despite Rakor's silence, John felt a deep connection to him. He had helped this creature, and in return, Rakor had shown a kind of silent trust. For a few days, John tried to make small talk with Rakor, asking questions or offering to teach him about farm life, but there was never a response. Rakor never spoke. Instead, he simply watched with a focused intensity, his gaze steady and unwavering. It was as if Rakor was absorbing everything around him, but he didn't know how to express what he was thinking. It frustrated John, but at the same time, it only deepened his curiosity. One afternoon, John was working in the fields, pulling weeds from the garden, when he noticed Rakor standing by the edge of the woods, his posture tense. His head was tilted slightly to the side, listening intently. John paused, feeling his heart rate quicken. Was Rakor hearing something, or was he just sensing danger? "Rakor," John called, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Is something wrong?" Rakor turned his head slightly but didn't move. The alien soldier's eyes flicked toward John for a moment, and then back to the woods. He wasn't looking at John anymore. He was looking at something else. John followed Rakor's gaze, but there was nothing in the woods. No movement, no sign of anything unusual. Still, John felt uneasy. "Are you expecting someone?" John asked, his voice low. Rakor's golden eyes met John's briefly, but he didn't answer. John felt the weight of the silence press down on him. It was as if Rakor was holding something back, something important. John had no idea what it was, but it was clear that whatever Rakor was waiting for had something to do with the strange ships in the sky. John's thoughts were interrupted when Rakor slowly turned away from the woods and began walking toward him. His movements were silent and graceful, but there was an underlying tension in his every step. It was as though he was preparing for something big, something he couldn't control. Rakor stopped just a few feet away from John, and for the first time, his expression softened, just slightly. He looked at John as though he were about to say something, perhaps something important. But then he seemed to hesitate. "Rakor," John said, his voice soft but firm. "You don't have to keep quiet till you can talk. I want to know more. I want to understand." The same ships that had been hovering high above in the days before. But now, they were much closer, much. John's breath caught in his throat. His hands clenched into fists, and his heart pounded in his chest. There was no more time to think. The moment had come. Rakor appeared beside him, his eyes locked on the descending ships. His posture was tense, his muscles coiled, ready for whatever was about to come. He hadn't spoken much since that afternoon, but John could feel the weight of his presence, the fear and anger that radiated off him. Rakor had made his choice, and now he would face the consequences. "They're here," Rakor said, his voice steady but filled with the kind of resolve that only came from a warrior who knew what was at stake. John didn't reply. He didn't know what to say. He had never been in a situation like this before. All he could do was stand by Rakor and prepare for whatever came next. The ships grew louder, their massive forms blocking out the stars as they hovered above the farm. John could see the outlines of the soldiers aboard, figures moving in the shadows of the craft. It was clear that they were coming down, preparing to land. "What do we do now?" John asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Rakor turned to him, his golden eyes meeting John's. There was a brief pause before he spoke. "We fight," he said simply. John swallowed hard. Fight? How could they fight? He wasn't prepared for something like this. But then he looked at Rakor, the soldier who had fought battles across the stars, who had lived a life John couldn't even begin to imagine. And he realized that this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about protecting the bond they had formed, the trust they had built. John nodded, his mind working quickly. There had to be something they could use, something they could do. His farm was large, with plenty of places to hide and defend. He could use the barn for cover. He had some old tools in the shed. But against alien soldiers, was any of that going to be enough? Rakor must have sensed his hesitation because he gave him a reassuring nod. "Don't worry," he said. "I will protect you. You have already given me something no one else has, a reason to fight." John felt a sense of strength fill him, not because of any weapon or plan, but because of the trust Rakor had in him. He wasn't alone. And for the first time since the ships had appeared, he felt a sense of determination. The ships continued to descend, their engines roaring as they neared the ground. John's heart raced, but he forced himself to take deep breaths. He wasn't going to let fear control him. He was going to stand by Rakor, and together they would face whatever came next. The first ship landed with a loud thud, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The doors of the ship hissed open, and out stepped several alien soldiers. They were tall, with sleek, dark armor, and they carried weapons that gleamed in the light of the moon. Rakor stepped forward, his posture straight, his eyes fierce. The alien soldiers stopped at the sight of him, their eyes narrowing as they recognized him. "Rakor," one of them called out, his voice cold and commanding. "You have no place here. You belong with us, not with these humans." Rakor's eyes flashed, and for a moment, John thought he might charge at them. But instead the alien soldier spoke, his voice calm, though filled with an undeniable force. "You are wrong," Rakor said. "I no longer belong to you. I have made my choice." John stood behind him, uncertain but ready. The tension between them was thick, and John knew that things were about to get much worse before they got better. But there was one thing he was sure of. He wasn't going to let Rockcore face this alone. The air was thick with tension as the alien soldiers stepped off their ships, their movements purposeful and confident. John could feel the weight of their presence pressing down on him, but he refused to back down. He stood tall beside Rockcore, his heart pounding, but his resolve growing stronger with every passing second. The alien soldiers looked down at John with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. They were taller than humans, their dark armor gleaming under the moonlight. They carried weapons that hummed with energy, powerful tools designed for destruction. John had no idea how he was supposed to stand up to them. He was just a farmer. He wasn't trained for battle. But Rockcore was no ordinary being. He was a soldier, a warrior, and his presence beside John was all the strength he needed. Rockcore took a step forward, his eyes locked on the leader of the alien soldiers. The leader was taller than the others, his armor marked with a symbol that looked like a twisted alien crest. His eyes, cold and calculating, swept over John before returning to Rockcore. "You are a traitor, Rockcore," the leader said, his voice booming in the still night air. "You've betrayed your own people, your cause. You belong with us, not with these primitive creatures." Rockcore's gaze remained steady, his expression unwavering. John could see the anger in the soldier's eyes, but there was something else, something deeper. It was the fire of defiance. Rockcore wasn't just fighting for his own life. He was fighting for what he believed in. "I don't belong to you anymore," Rockcore replied, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "I've seen the horrors your empire has caused. I can't be a part of it." The leader's face twisted into a sneer. "You think you're above us. You think these humans will protect you. You're mistaken, Rockcore. You're weak without us." John could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about him and Rockcore anymore. This was about something much bigger. The alien soldiers were here to reclaim Rockcore, to force him back into their army, to make him serve their cause once again. And yet, Rockcore was standing firm, refusing to go back, refusing to be controlled. The leader raised his weapon, the energy humming with power. "You will come with us," he said. "Now." Rockcore's eyes flickered toward John for a brief moment, as if silently asking for his support. John felt a chill run down his spine, but he didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. "You'll have to get through me first," John said, his words louder than he felt. The leader turned his gaze to John, amusement flickering in his eyes. "You," he sneered, "you think you can stop us? You're nothing but a human." But Rockcore spoke before the leader could say more. "He's not just a human. He's the reason I'm standing here today. He's the reason I'm not afraid anymore." John's heart swelled with emotion at Rockcore's words. He had never expected to hear something like that from the alien soldier. Rockcore had been quiet for so long, keeping his thoughts to himself, and now he was opening up, revealing the truth behind his actions. The leader's eyes narrowed, and he stepped closer to John. "You're making a mistake, human. This is not your fight." John held his ground, even though every part of him wanted to turn and run. He wasn't a fighter, and he certainly wasn't prepared to face down alien soldiers. But as he looked at Rockcore, he knew he couldn't walk away. He had made a choice, to stand by this creature, to help him, and to protect him from whatever was coming. "I know it's not my fight," John said, his voice firm, "but I won't let you take him." The leader looked at him with a mixture of contempt and disbelief. "Very well, human. If you won't step aside, then you'll be dealt with." Without warning, the alien soldiers raised their weapons, aiming them at John and Rockcore. The energy fields surrounding the weapons flickered, and John felt the air grow heavy with the threat of violence. But just as the soldiers prepared to strike, Rockcore moved. He lunged forward with incredible speed, his strength evident as he slammed into the leader with a force that knocked the soldier off his feet. The other soldiers reacted instantly, raising their weapons to fire, But Rakor was faster. With a growl, he tackled the second soldier, knocking him to the ground and disarming him in one swift motion. John stood frozen for a moment, watching in awe as Rakor fought with the precision and power of a trained warrior. It was clear now that Rakor wasn't just some injured creature in need of help. He was a force to be reckoned with. The alien soldiers, though skilled, seemed unprepared for the intensity of Rakor's attacks. But the battle wasn't over yet. The remaining soldiers regrouped, raising their weapons to fire. John knew they wouldn't hesitate to kill him and Rakor if given the chance. He looked around quickly, his mind racing. There had to be something he could do. His eyes landed on the barn, and an idea sparked in his mind. Without thinking, he dashed toward the barn, Rakor's voice echoing in his mind, urging him to stay safe. John reached the barn door and grabbed a large pitchfork that he kept stored in the corner. He wasn't much of a fighter, but he had a few things on his farm that could be used as tools. With the pitchfork in hand, he returned to the fight just in time to see Rakor deliver another powerful blow to one of the soldiers. John rushed forward, swinging the pitchfork at another soldier who was closing in on him. The soldier dodged, but the distraction was enough for Rakor to land a powerful punch, sending the soldier crashing to the ground. The leader, now furious, ordered the remaining soldiers to fall back. John and Rakor stood side by side, breathing heavily, but neither of them was ready to back down. The alien soldiers retreated toward their ships, their leader glaring at Rakor with hatred. "This isn't over," the leader shouted as he climbed back into his ship. "We will return. And next time, we'll finish this." John watched as the ships lifted off, their engines roaring as they disappeared into the night sky. The fight was over, for now. But John knew it wasn't the end. Rakor had made his choice, and now they had to face the consequences together. John turned to Rakor, his heart pounding with adrenaline. "Are you okay?" he asked. Rakor nodded, his expression hard, but there was a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "We've won this round, but the battle is far from over. Thank you, John." John smiled, his fear slowly fading as he realized that he had made the right decision. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The stars above twinkled brightly, but the night was far from peaceful. John stood at the edge of the field, his heart still racing from the confrontation. The alien soldiers had retreated for now, but he knew they would be back. Rakor had warned him, and now he understood. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. Rakor stood beside him, his posture still tense, but there was something in his eyes now, a look that John hadn't seen before. It wasn't fear, but a kind of quiet resolve, as if he had accepted the reality of the situation. He wasn't running anymore. He wasn't hiding. John turned to him. "What happens now?" Rakor glanced at him, his golden eyes softening for a moment. "Now, we prepare." John nodded, even though he didn't fully understand what that meant. He was just a farmer after all. He wasn't equipped for this kind of fight. He had no weapons, no training. He didn't know how he could help Rakor face the alien soldiers who had come for him. But he knew one thing. He wasn't going to turn his back on him. Not now. Rakor studied John for a moment, as if reading his thoughts. Then, with a small nod, he said, "You don't need to be a soldier to fight. You've already done more than I could have asked for. You've shown me something I never thought I'd find again: trust." John felt a warmth spread through him at Rakor's words. The alien soldier had always been quiet, distant, and somewhat guarded. But now he was opening up. John had earned his trust, and that was something he didn't take lightly. He didn't know what kind of future awaited them, but he knew they would face it together. For the next few days, John and Rakor worked together, preparing for the inevitable return of the alien soldiers. John tried his best to help, even though he felt out of his depth. He wasn't a fighter. He didn't know how to prepare for a battle like this, but he could offer something the alien soldiers didn't have: his knowledge of the land. Rakor showed John how to use his natural surroundings for defense. They worked on setting up traps and using the barn as a stronghold. John helped fortify the house, making sure there were enough places to hide if the soldiers came back. Every day, he learned more about Rakor, about his past, about his struggles, and about the life he had left behind. Rakor explained that he had been a soldier in a vast galactic empire, one that sought to conquer and control other worlds. His loyalty had once been to the empire, but as time passed, he began to see the destruction it caused. The innocent lives lost, the suffering. The empire's methods were brutal, and Rakor couldn't stand it anymore. That was why he had fled, why he had come to Earth, a peaceful world, far away from the war he had left behind. John had never imagined such a life. He had always lived quietly, working the land and minding his own business. The thought of fighting an empire that spanned across galaxies seemed like something out of a dream. But standing beside Rakor, he realized just how real it all was. Rakor had done the unimaginable. He had turned his back on everything he knew, everything he had fought for. And now, John was standing with him, helping him fight against those same forces. It was hard to believe, but it was happening. The days passed quickly, and as John worked alongside Rakor, he began to feel a sense of purpose that he had never known before. His life had always been about the land, about the crops and animals, but now it was about something bigger. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the odds. One afternoon, as John was working near the barn, he noticed Rakor standing by the edge of the field, looking up at the sky. The alien soldier's posture was rigid, his eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon. John walked over to him, his footsteps muffled by the soft earth. "What is it?" Rakor didn't answer immediately. He continued to stare at the sky, his eyes focused, his senses alert. After a moment, he finally spoke. "They're coming," he said softly. "The fleet, I can sense them." John's heart sank. The time had come. The alien soldiers were returning, and this time, they wouldn't stop until they had Rakor. John's mind raced, but he refused to panic. He couldn't afford to. They had prepared for this. They had built their defenses, set their traps. John looked at Rakor, who was still watching the sky with a determined expression. "We'll make them regret coming here," John said, his voice steady despite the fear he felt inside. Rakor turned to him, his eyes meeting John's. For the first time, there was a flicker of something else in those eyes. Gratitude. "I believe we can," he said. "Together, we are stronger than they think." John nodded, feeling a sense of unity with the alien soldier. In that moment, he realized that they were no longer just two beings from different worlds. They were allies, bound together by a common cause, and they were going to fight to protect the peace they had found, no matter the cost. The distant hum of engines grew louder, signaling the arrival of the alien ships. John's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood tall. There was no turning back now. Rakor stepped forward, his eyes scanning the area once more. "We fight with everything we have, and we win. For Earth, for us." John's heart swelled with pride. He was ready. Together, they would stand against the coming storm. They would face the alien soldiers with courage and strength, and they would fight to the end. The ships were getting closer now. John could see their dark shapes against the night sky, and he knew that the final battle was about to begin. But no matter what happened, he wasn't afraid anymore. With Rakor by his side, he knew they had a chance. The night air was thick with tension as John and Rakor stood side by side, their eyes fixed on the horizon. The low hum of alien ships filled the air, growing louder with each passing minute. The distant lights of the ships flickered like stars. But these were no ordinary lights. These were the vessels of the alien soldiers, and they were coming for Rakor. John's heart raced, but he stood firm. He had never faced a battle like this before. His entire life had been about farming, about growing crops, taking care of animals, and living a quiet, peaceful existence. But now he was standing with an alien soldier, preparing to face down a fleet of ships, all because of a bond he had formed with a being from another world. It felt surreal, but it was his reality now. Raykor stood tall beside him. His eyes narrowed as he watched the ships. There was no fear in his expression, only the calm focus of a seasoned warrior. Despite the danger, he seemed at ease. John couldn't help but admire him. Raykor had seen battles across galaxies, fought in wars that John couldn't even begin to imagine. And yet, here he was, fighting for his freedom, and for Earth. "They're almost here," John said, his voice barely above a whisper. Raykor nodded, his gaze never leaving the ships. "We've prepared well, John. We have a chance." John looked around, taking in the defenses they had set up over the past week. The barn had been fortified, with the windows covered and the doors reinforced. Traps had been laid in the fields, using the land to their advantage. John wasn't a soldier, but he had learned quickly. Raykor had taught him how to use his surroundings, how to fight with the land instead of against it. John's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned to see a small group of figures approaching in the distance. At first, he thought it was another group of alien soldiers, but as they got closer, he recognized them. It was a group of resistance fighters, aliens who had defected from the same empire that Raykor had escaped from. Their leader, a tall alien with silver skin and glowing blue eyes, stepped forward, a calm but serious expression on her face. "Raykor," she said, her voice low but full of authority. "We heard your signal. We've come to help." John's eyes widened. He had heard of resistance groups, but he never imagined one would come to Earth. These were the allies Raykor had mentioned, a group of beings who had also rejected the Empire's methods and chosen to fight for freedom. They were the hope Raykor had been waiting for. The leader of the group looked at John, her eyes assessing him. "You're the human who has helped Raykor." John nodded, feeling a bit nervous under her gaze. "Yes, I've been helping him." The leader's eyes softened, and she gave him a slight nod. "You've shown great courage, human. The Empire doesn't just fight with weapons. They fight with fear. But you, Raykor, and your people, together, we can break that fear." Raykor stepped forward, his gaze steady. "We've fought for too long, in too many places. This time, we fight for something more. We fight for freedom. For all of us." The resistance group began to move into position, taking their places around the farm and the barn. They were a mix of different species, each with unique features and abilities. Some had wings, others had scales, and still others had forms that were almost human but with subtle differences. They were a diverse group, united by a single cause: to fight against the Empire's oppressive rule. John stood beside Raykor, watching as the resistance fighters prepared for battle. He felt a sense of awe at the strength of these beings, beings who had fought for their freedom and now offered their help to protect Earth. He was just a farmer, but with their help, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Raykor turned to him, his expression serious. "Stay close to the barn, John. If things go wrong, it's the safest place for you." John nodded, but a part of him didn't want to stay behind. He had come this far. He had fought beside Raykor, and he didn't want to run now. But he understood the necessity. Raykor was right. The barn was the best place to regroup if the battle turned against them. The first wave of alien soldiers arrived, their ships descending onto the field. The sound of their engines grew louder, and the ground trembled slightly under the weight of their ships. John's heart skipped a beat as the doors of the ships opened, and the soldiers began to file out. Raykor's hand instinctively went to the weapon at his side, a sleek, glowing blade that hummed with power. The resistance fighters around him readied their weapons as well. They were all prepared for this moment. They had fought for years against the Empire, and now they were going to stand against it here, on Earth. The alien leader who had confronted Raykor before stepped forward, his face twisted in anger. "You think you can fight us? You think you can stop the Empire?" Raykor's voice was cold, but full of determination. The Empire's time is over. With that, the battle began. Energy blasts lit up the night sky as the Resistance fighters clashed with the alien soldiers. Rancor moved with incredible speed, his blade cutting through the air with precision. John could only watch in awe as the fight unfolded around him. The Resistance was fierce, and though the alien soldiers were powerful, they were not prepared for the unity of the Resistance. John's eyes darted around, watching for any sign of danger. He knew his place in this battle. He wasn't a soldier, but he could help. He could assist Rancor and the others in any way he could. As the battle raged on, John heard a voice behind him. He turned to see one of the Resistance fighters, an alien with long, silver hair and sharp, pointed ears, gesturing for him to follow. "Come," she shouted over the noise of the battle. "We need to secure the outer perimeter." John nodded, grabbing a weapon from the nearby shed, a simple rifle he had once used to protect his farm from wild animals. He wasn't a fighter, but in that moment, he felt the weight of his decision. He was no longer just a farmer. He was part of something bigger. He was part of the fight for freedom. As he moved into position with the Resistance fighters, John realized something. This was no longer just about protecting Rancor. This was about protecting Earth. And he would fight, not just for his farm, but for the future of the world. The battle continued, the sounds of conflict echoing across the land. But in that moment, John knew that they had a chance. Together, they could defeat the Empire. Together, they could win.